Good morning, everybody. I am here in Grafton Hill, my home neighborhood. I'm with a really good friend of mine and also someone who has a really unique service that he provides. He is currently my neighbor and also a top expert, I would consider, for helping people understand the tax credit opportunities that take place here in Grafton Hill and in Dayton as a whole. um, Grafton Hill because of the historical status it has. So I'm here with Dan Barton,
Hi. Hello.
and I'm really grateful. Dan is actually working right now on a application for um, myself and my partners on the Commodore, which is a 45 unit 1922 building. We're fully restoring that right now. It was a package of four other buildings. Three of the four buildings are completed, and we start renovation on the tall one, which you'll see in the videos that we are providing also. But I'm going to have Dan talk a little bit about what he does, and then we're going to talk about the structure behind us and how there's a lot of unique opportunities for investors. And if you are willing to put the time and effort if you're willing to learn different ways and methods, there is incredible opportunities here in Dayton as a whole, particularly on the west side. And so, Dan, why don't you share with us today what you do and how you make a living?
Okay. Well, my specialty and area of interest is in historic preservation, and both from the standpoint of preserving neighborhoods, but also individual projects, and then helping people get projects ready to go to a renovation state. One of the great incentives that exists is a federal program, the Federal Historic Tax Credit Program, which has been around since the 70s, and then also a state historic preservation program that matches and overlays the federal application. The federal application will save a redeveloper of a historic property 20% of the restoration costs. The state offers a 25% credit on top of that, so a 45% credit subsidy.
You're saying that there's a 45% potential credit for anybody investing in a historical
Yes,
building
yeah.
or
The criteria are that it is eligible for or on the National Register. Not a lot of people don't understand it, don't understand how it works, but from the standpoint of a historic neighborhood that is already on the National Register, it's the best tool that we've got to renovate infrastructure and take care of all kinds of different things that have to do with renovating the neighborhood and renovating individual houses. From the standpoint of an investor, there's very few other things that'll return as much per dollar input as the historic tax credit. We are looking and standing in front of two properties that we moved these houses to preserve them. They were going to be demolished, and we were able to move these and are undertaking a renovation of them with the benefit of the historic tax credits.
So did you have to purchase the properties before you?
We had the empty land. A lot of older neighborhoods have places where buildings were demolished. We had the land. These two houses were in the historic district, but in an area where an expansion was going on and the owner was going to tear them down. So they basically gave us the houses and we moved them. It was a preservation emergency, and the National Park Service, the State Historic Preservation Office, their main focus is to try to preserve historic properties. So we basically created the first pathway towards preservation by moving. And we've had that accepted by the state and by the National Park Service. Wow. So we were able to move both of these houses to this empty lot, and we're in the process of re-establishing them on this site as they sat at their other location. We're going to redevelop these as housing for medical residents at the local Grandview Hospital.
Wow, that's really a great idea. Grandview's doing really well right now and expanding quite a bit. So how long did that process take?
The process, because we were pioneering, was kind of took a little longer than it would now, simply from the standpoint of no one had a process for approving a historic tax credit application to move properties. So it took about 12, 14 months. But then once all the approvals were done, it was really just a process of getting the permits from the city, for the removal and then preparing the site for the new locations and then getting
Wow.
them over here.
So is it safe to say, I don't mean to simplify it, but if I were able to find an empty lot that was qualified for the program that we run here and through the city, uh, and then was able to find a property that mimicked this, eh, that there's a possibility that we could do something similar, or was this really a unique thing?
Well, this particular case is fairly unique in that these properties were going to be torn down.
Okay.
The granting of the appropriateness finding was based on the fact that they were going to be torn down and lost, and they were significant historic properties. But the tax credit works for anything else and is basically available for any kind of a redevelopment or a reinvestment in a historic neighborhood. And a lot of people think, well, maybe my property isn't really that historic, and they're not aware that the standard for historic in a historic district is that it's 50 years old, and it contributes to the fabric of a neighborhood. Now, we're in an 1890s neighborhood, but we have things that are newer than 1890s,
Sure.
1920s apartments, 40s apartments, etc., which have achieved historic status.
Okay.
The quote, the historic character is something that's always evolving.
Right.
And a lot of people think of it as a fixed thing, but in fact, it's everything that's 50 years or older.
I did notice that as I've done some research on the neighborhoods, that sort of a pivotal moment for this particular neighborhood, Grafton Hill, which we are heavily investing in, what happened when the application was accepted for it to become a historic neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I've looked at the demographics and also the valuations of different areas. Can you speak to that for just a second?
Yeah, there were a couple things that happened that were going on. We decided to become a historic district in the late 80s. And upon achieving that status, it really sparked a very quick turnaround in terms of the number of properties that were owner-occupied and were being rehabilitated, simply because when banks loan money, they look at property values in the surrounding areas. They look for comparables, and one of the things that they look for is if you have a property in a historic neighborhood, it tends to be worth more than a similar property in a non-historic neighborhood.
Okay.
So when they went to begin to financing the renovations that we needed, when we became a historic district, they could go to the other historic districts and find comparable values.
Okay.
And that meant immediately everyone could get funded who wanted to do something and were qualified to get funded. So our property values went up about 280% inside of 5 years.
Wow.
Because this pent-up demand suddenly was able to be met. So basically, within about 8 to 10 years, all of the houses were renovated and were owner-occupied. The bigger problems were some of the larger buildings, like you've been working on, that is beyond the scope of a do-it-yourself or weekend warrior. Right. That's something that takes a bigger organization, and that's where the historic tax credits mesh in so well, so that it makes better sense for you to invest $1 into a historic neighborhood getting the tax credit than a comparable building outside of the historic district.
Well, that's really that's a really incredible story. I know for sure that it's been a great experience for me here, being here so far, particularly working with you. One thing that I just wanted to close on is maybe just your thoughts of where this area is going, and what kind of what kind of things are you seeing that are positive or negative in challenges that as we share the programs through the city and as we attract investors and developers and to come here. What would your opinion be in your
what I see is there are big trends in history that kind of sweep positively and negatively. We're at the beginning of, I think, a very long-term recovery for this immediate area. People's attitudes have changed from where they were 20, 30 years ago. People are appreciating historic character, want walkable neighborhoods, still want a yard, but want to be close to amenities, close to where they work, are not less enamored of the far distant suburbs that were just built in the bean fields, and are taking advantage of the things that are happening downtown with the ballpark, all of the new cultural restaurant, brew pub, and all of that social scene that's developing
Sure.
down there. We're just a stroll away. So I think the character of the neighborhood is going to keep getting more rich and more interesting. And the people are now willing to come in and make the investments to bring it back. Everybody making an investment makes everyone else's investment secure.
Right.
I see the neighborhood repopulating with young families. We've got 2 children on the way here in this
Cool.
2 blocks
All
here.
right.
The whole dynamic has changed. It seems as though the 20-somethings look at Dayton differently than they did 20, 30 years ago. And we're really happy. We're welcoming everybody in, and we think investors need to come in and look and see what's still here that still needs a little TLC.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time today. One last question is, do you think I could drive that thing at some point?
Yeah, you could give it a try.
Okay,
yeah,
all right.
Yeah.
I'd like to go do that.
Yeah,
sometime.
we'll stand back and watch.
I don't want to do it anywhere near your house, though. I might.
Well, we got some empty land. You can just cruise around back there.
I just want to knock something down.
Yeah, you can do that with that thing.
Only to rebuild, though, of course.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dan.
Sure.
I appreciate your time.
Okay.
Have a great day. Thanks.
Okay.